All right, let's take a quick look at what's going on here.
Breaking news on Capitol Hill. The House just voted on the future of TikTok in the U.S. Lawmakers considering a bill that would require Chinese company ByteDance to sell TikTok or face a ban in the United States. NBC senior national political reporter Sahil Kapoor joins us now with more on this. The final vote here, 352 to 65, overwhelming, bipartisan. Sahil, this bill now goes to the Senate, where its future is less clear. But this is a big step. So what would this bill do if passed?
That's right, Joe. This is a huge vote, 352 members of the House. It needed a 2/3 majority to pass under this process, and it cleared that with a
So they're actually going onto a full ban.
A wide margin to spare. There were some notable opponents here from both the left and the right. Some progressive members like Mark Pocan and Pramila Jayapal opposed it. They said the process was too rushed. Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez is one of them. Others opposed it from the right, like Congressman Thomas Massey, who argued that there were First Amendment concerns. But nevertheless, a huge vote that would force TikTok's parent company to sell it or get banned. Remember, the heart of the problem here is that TikTok's parent company, ByteDance, is a Chinese-based company based in Beijing, subject to Chinese law that says if China asks the company for information, it is required to hand it over, and that information could include user data on some 150 to 170 million Americans who use it. That's a tantalizing trove of information that the Chinese government could, in theory, get its hands on if that law were to be triggered, which is why the U.S. government considers this a national security threat. So that's what the bill would do, force ByteDance to sell TikTok or face a ban in the United States. It goes to the Senate now, where there's less urgency about this bill, and senators have a whole bunch of different ideas about, how to approach this. Some of them want a broader approach that covers categories of companies, not simply one company, maybe other Chinese companies, maybe other companies controlled by foreign adversaries. So the fate of this bill in terms of getting to President Biden's desk is still very much up in the air, Joe.
TikTok has put on a full court press to try and stop this from happening, including going to Washington, bringing people of small businesses that rely on TikTok to Washington. What is TikTok saying about this movement right now?
Yeah, there's been an aggressive lobbying blitz from TikTok, which kind of flared up last year when we first started hearing, a meaningful push on Capitol Hill to ban TikTok. They have flooded Capitol Hill with content creators, several of whom have millions of followers, pleading with lawmakers to protect the app, arguing that their own livelihoods depend on it. There are a lot of young people in particular, Joe, who are vigorous users of TikTok, vigorous users of this app, and rely on it to get their news, rely on it for entertainment. So TikTok has been trying to take advantage of that. They've also issued push alerts and notifications to many of their users, trying to send them to, light up the phone lines, to burn up the phone lines of congressional offices in a bid to save it. It does seem to have had some impact. I mean, if you look at some of the no's on the list, they represent towns with lots of young voters. One example there is Mark Pocan, who represents Madison, Wisconsin, a lot of college students there. He told me he was simply not convinced by the administration's security briefings, that in fact it was so unconvincing to him that it moved him from being open-minded to no. He's obviously in the minority here because most House lawmakers do support this bill to ban TikTok. Most senators we talk to also support the idea of doing something that would change the way TikTok is currently operating in terms of its ownership, the links to the Chinese government. Whether that happens in the Senate, very unclear still. It's got a long way to go. And as I mentioned, senators just don't have quite the same level of urgency that House members did in zooming this bill to the floor with that unanimous committee vote last week and this full House vote today that just passed the chamber, Joe.
One person who's moving in the opposite direction of many members of Congress is former President Trump. He wanted to ban TikTok back in 2020. Now he says he opposes this ban that was just passed by the House. So often we see Republicans fall in line with Trump. Clearly that didn't happen here. Why not?
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Joe. I think Donald Trump's influence on Capitol Hill is very, very significant with Republicans, but it tends to be on issues that he genuinely cares about and that lawmakers believe he genuinely cares about.
Oh, I do just want to say thank you so much, Made in USA, for the host. I believe that just came up. Thank you so much.
This was a very abrupt reversal from Donald Trump, and a number of his ardent supporters say that, they believe he was a great president, that they will support him again in the 2024 election. They'll even campaign for him, but they say he's simply wrong about this. That includes Congressman Troy Nehls of Texas, a vigorous Trump supporter, endorsed this bill. The reasons are, it's anybody's guess really, but Joe, there is a trend where Donald Trump's influence tends to be the least on legislative matters, where a lot of lawmakers, a lot of even Republican lawmakers who are his allies, don't take him as seriously. They don't believe he's actually committed to this and that he'll actually use his clout to punish them, to turn his voters against them if they cross him on this.
I don't know how I feel about the TikTok ban in general. Like, love the Chinese people, fuck China, right? Simple like that. I don't always find it good that democratic, or crony capitalistic companies are, I'll say crony capitalistic because it's very or state-run capitalism is running these types of companies. So there does need to be something involved with this. I would say like maybe Chinese companies can have stake in American companies, but the companies have to be American or have to be from some certain subset of companies. We'll take a look and see. This is probably just exactly what they said anyways. Like, it's not really a ban either. They're just gonna force China to sell it to a US company. So the House voted Wednesday to pass legislation that could ban TikTok in the US. That could ban TikTok. This is, I believe, gonna be more of like a highlight than anything else. It could ban. We'll see though. It just seems weird language. The U.S. Republicans and Democrats alike sound the alarm that the popular video sharing app owned by a China-based company is a national security threat. The vote was 352 to 65, with one member, Representative Jasmine Crockett, Texas, voting bill. The bill now heads to Senate, where it faces an uncertain fate, and there appears to be less urgency to act. Following updates. Communist China is America's largest geopolitical foe and is using technology to actively undermine America's economy and security, Speaker Mike Johnson, RLA, said in a statement after the vote, warning that TikTok could be used to access American data and spread harmful information. Today's bipartisan vote demonstrates Congress's opposition to Communist China's attempts to spy and manipulate Americans, and signal our resolve to deter our enemies. 50 Democrats and 15 Republicans voted against the bill. Among them were progressives like Representative Pramila Jayapal, D-Wash, Ro Khanna, D. California, Ruben Gallego, D. Ares, a Senate candidate, as well as conservatives like Representative, Marjorie Taylor Greene, RGA, who lamented that she had previously been banned from social media. The top Democrat on the Intelligence Committee, Representative Jim Himes of Connecticut, was a surprising no vote. He also cited free speech issues with the bill. There are free speech issues which we can argue, but it's got to be two-sided here. The companies have to be backed by free speech in general. I feel like adversaries are trying to shut down news, blah 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 blah. TikTok-owned China-based company ByteDance mounted an aggressive lobbying campaign to kill the legislation, arguing that it would violate the First Amendment rights of its 170 million US users and harm thousands of small businesses that rely on it. The process was secret, and the bill jammed through for one reason: it's a ban, a company on X said.
Joining me now is Democratic Congressman from Illinois, Raja Krishnamurthy. He is the ranking member of the China Select Committee, and he and Chairman Mike Gallagher introduced that bill that could ban TikTok. So thank you so much for being here, Congressman.
Hey, thanks, Yamiche.
Now, it's still unclear when the Senate will take up your legislation, but I want to play for you what some senators are saying about your bill. Take a listen.
I understand people like TikTok. I would like to keep TikTok running but not have our data used by the Communist Chinese
How will you vote
Party?
on this?
I don't know yet. I mean, I'm just being honest with you. I am definitely conflicted.
I tell you, there are a lot of questions my colleagues are asking, myself included. I haven't come to a final decision as to whether or not it should be banned.
So, Congressman, you just got a classified briefing this afternoon. What is your message to senators in particular who may be on the fence about this legislation?
Well, first of all, this is not a ban. What we're calling for is a divestment of TikTok by ByteDance, its owner, which is controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. And really, this isn't about TikTok, it's about ByteDance. And I think that what we're hearing is the president wants this authority to be able to balance the legitimate concerns of people who are on the platform, who should continue to enjoy the platform, with the legitimate national security concerns that have to do with our adversary, the CCP, and what it does in terms of its access to data as well as in manipulation of the algorithm on the platform.
But, Congressman, if they don't divest, you will ban them. And to be clear, you also put a 6-month deadline on this. So explain how you square that with the idea that you put this ban, you put the consequence of the ban on the table. That was your decision.
Yeah, so basically they would be suspended from being able to operate until they comply with the law. This is very common. We have various laws that basically prevent excess ownership with regard to broadcast out.
I'll even point out there should be laws against companies selling to external entities outside of a certain trade agreement within the, actually, now that I'm rethinking about it, it's not about trading with companies outside of the United States. It's about trading information with governments. There should be lots of rules about internal companies not being able to make money from external governments in terms of
telecom companies, even railroads. And so what we're saying here is they need to comply with that particular law. They need to reduce their ownership to no more than a 20% stake in the company. And at that point, they would be in compliance.
I understand what your view on that. I want to also ask you about something about former President Trump. He said he believes that TikTok poses a national security risk. He initially supported banning it. I know you're saying it would be suspended, but he also is reversing course here, is flipping the script. How worried are you that President Trump and him not supporting this bill, that it could tank it in the 11th hour?
Well, I think he's been flip-flopping and then flipping. Just the other day, he gave a rambling interview with CNBC in which he said, TikTok is absolutely a national security threat. I'm not really sure what exactly is motivating Donald Trump. Something tells me it has something to do with politics. Surprise, surprise. But the main point here is we have to do what is right. And what is right here is making sure that we ensure the divestment of the Chinese Communist Party and ByteDance with regard to TikTok.
Congressman, I also want to ask you about the constitutional issues that might be here. The ACLU has been critical of your bill, saying it would violate the First Amendment. They argue, quote, banning...
Like I say, I don't know, maybe this is a little more nuanced than anything else, but it's not about banning TikTok. That's not what they're trying to do. They're trying to separate the company's entity with the CCP, and if the CCP would not let go of TikTok in any way, then you're not banning TikTok, you're banning the CCP's interaction with TikTok.
TikTok would have a profound implications for our constitutional right to free speech and free expression, because millions of Americans rely on the app every day for information, communication, advocacy, and entertainment. So how would you respond to that argument? And are you concerned that this bill could end up being blocked by the courts because of those constitutional issues that the ACLU is bringing up?
No, there is no right. There's no First Amendment right to espionage. No, there's no First Amendment right to harm our national security. There are a number of cases, including Supreme Court cases, that basically say that even in a situation where, for instance, a bookstore is not in compliance with laws of general application, and even though obviously the authors and others...
Actually, that's a good way of putting it. Like, if a bookstore had if a bookstore was keeping track of customers that came in and out, took pictures of all their faces, and then was selling it to the Chinese government, it's not about the bookstore anymore. It's not about the company. It's really about the interaction with an external government.
Have the right to express themselves, and the books contained in that bookstore should be able to sell them.
Yep.
If the bookstore is out of compliance, it's not allowed to operate until it's in compliance, and that's the situation here. Similarly, broadcast outlets and other companies, we have foreign ownership limits or thresholds that can't be crossed, and I think that this is one of those situations where we don't want a foreign adversary's controlled social media app to basically harm our national security while we want people to continue to express themselves on the platform. I think that this law achieves the balance, and so people will be able to continue to do so. We have precedent here. There was Grindr, which is a LGBTQ app that was owned at one time by a Chinese company. Because we realized that the Chinese Communist Party had access to the sensitive personal data of LGBTQ members of the military and the government, we required divestment. That happened without a hitch. It happened quickly because Grindr was a valuable social media app, just as TikTok is, and there was no disruption of service, which is what we would expect here as well.
Well, Congressman, you talked about TikTok being a sort of bookstore. What if the president was in that bookstore? You have President Biden's campaign. As you know, they've joined TikTok. In fact, their campaign posted a new video today.
That's exactly it. They can sell whatever they want inside the bookstore, but it's not about what's being sold inside the bookstore. It's about the interaction between the bookstore and another government.
Doesn't that undermine in some ways your argument that this poses a national security threat if the president of the United States and his campaign is on it?
Well, I'm not going to tell the president how to campaign. I don't have TikTok on my own personal phone, and it's certainly banned from all government devices. But I think that everyone should use it very cautiously going forward. What I do know is what happened last week illustrates exactly why we need this particular bill. You may be aware that our particular bill passed out of the Energy and Commerce Committee, which is the committee of jurisdiction here, 50-0. That almost never happens, certainly not on the Energy and Commerce Committee. But the reason it happened is because TikTok, on the day of the vote, decided to use a push notification and a pop-up window on its app that required minor children, in order to be able to use the app, to call their member of Congress on the Energy and Commerce Committee to lobby against the bill in question. Well, when they called these offices, they flooded those offices with phone calls, by the way. These minor children basically asked the question, what is Congress and what is a congressman? And on top of that, in one case, they impersonated the child of one of the legislators. In another case, they actually called the congressman's office and said, I'm going to commit self-harm unless you turn on my TikTok. And so this illustrated in one example exactly why this particular legislation is necessary. Today, Christopher Wray at the Worldwide Threats hearing said in the open hearing, when I asked him about this particular example, he said he could not rule out that the CCP itself conducted this particular operation. So that is why we need this particular legislation.
Get rid of them.
We will certainly be watching this legislation. Thank you so much, Congressman, for your time.
Totally up for that.
Thank you.
Get rid of them. Separate the two things.
The fight is on.
Its backers say it's wrong to call legislation outright ban, dubbed Protecting Americans from Foreign Adversaries Controlled Applications Act. But the bill would create a process for the president to designate certain social media applications under the control of foreign adversaries. I don't think there's any question here.